Good afternoon and welcome to the Arise to Truth radio program. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Truth FM, thank you so much for doing that. We're coming to you live from the studios on the campus of the Tri-City School of Preaching and Christian Development, which is a work of the Stony Creek Church of Christ. In just a few moments, we'll be going on live on WZAP. We appreciate very much you joining us today and making the decision to participate with us in the study of the greatest of all books, the inspired, inerrant, perfect will of God. Good afternoon and welcome to the Arise to Truth radio program. We're coming to you live from the studios on the campus of the Tri-City School of Preaching and Christian Development, which is a work of the Stony Creek Church of Christ. We're coming to you live over WZAP 690 AM and 93.3 FM, also Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and over Truth FM. If you get that app, you can get a lot of great Bible programs on Truth FM, and so we would encourage you to do that. Today, we're going to be continuing our discussion of what the Bible has to say about beverage alcohol and the moderation argument. So I hope you have your Bibles and maybe something to take some notes with as we engage in this discussion. My name is Bill Haywood, and I serve as the director of the Tri-City School of Preaching and Christian Development. Also on the program.
My name is Tony Hoss. I am the preacher for the Centerview Church of Christ in Elizabethton, Tennessee as well. I'm one of the instructors for the Tri-City School of Preaching and Christian Development.
And it's great to have Tony. It's great to have you. It's also great to have Clayton Stewart in the studio. He is our technology specialist who takes care of getting us on the air and takes care of other things around the school. Tremendous blessing for us. You know, we've been engaged in this discussion of what the Bible has to say about beverage alcohol. And we're speaking specifically about the argument that says that it's all right to partake of beverage alcohol as long as you do it in moderation. In Galatians chapter 5, beginning at verse number 19, we read about the works of the flesh, and when we get to the end, there's something particular I want you to notice. Galatians 5 in verse number 19, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries. Now here comes the phrase, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now I want you to notice that phrase, and the like. You know, it's really interesting to me, Tony, as I look at this, and we're going to be looking at some statistics here in just a moment, and this is not the totality of our argument, but it is interesting to me when you think about that phrase, and the like. And he talks about drunkenness there, but think about the number of individuals, and I know of people, and you know of people, Tony, that they had just a couple of drinks, and based upon the world standards, they'd say, oh, they weren't drunk. But it was enough to soften them. It was enough to have them drop their guard. And look at these first works of the flesh that are mentioned here in verse 19. And they've had a couple of drinks, and they engage in adultery, fornication, uncleanness, which has to do with sexual sin, lewdness, which is a problem that we have in our culture, and individuals who would have never done those things, except they took a couple of drinks, they dropped their certain
Inhibitions have gone away.
Yeah. And they said, well, they weren't drunk. Well, they were softened enough. And that phrase, and the like, certainly tells us that beverage alcohol is among the deeds of the flesh.
Yeah, and these are things, and we all need to understand that these are things that are done in the flesh. There are a manifestation, things that we are physically involved in. So by nature, they are, what does he say? They're corrupt by nature. What does that mean? It's a sin. If it's corrupt, then it's sinful. If it's sinful, then it separates me from God. Therefore, my relationship is ruined. It's incumbent upon me then to figure things out and to get it right and to get it corrected. God has done His part. It's now it's up to me to understand. Since alcohol is such a bad thing, what do I do to fix that? How do we correct it?
Well, that's exactly right, Tony. And I want to reintroduce a question that we brought up last week, and that is the question, in anything that we do, shouldn't we be asking the question, what is most pleasing to God? And you talked about the young man who had the wagon that got as close to the edge as he possibly could. And then you had the other young man said, no, just the opposite. I want to be just as far away from the edge as I can. And the reality is, when we get this idea, well, would God really be displeased with this? Are you telling me I'd go to hell for drinking one beer? Well, with all due respect to anyone that would say that, folks, that's a silly question.
So that's the moderation argument.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And I think you brought this up, didn't you, last week, about how much adultery can I be involved in? How much lying can I do? How much killing? How much cheating? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're right. Can I fornicate in moderation?
Just a little bit. God's not going to send me
just
to hell.
Just a little moderation.
Yeah, just for a little. Yeah.
Lying, moderation of lying or adultery. You're exactly right, Tony. There's none of these things that we can do in moderation that's pleasing to God. And so when we talk about beverage alcohol, you're exactly right. It's not, we can't look at it and say, well, I'm just going to do a little bit of it. And there's a number of things, and we'll talk more about this as we go on. But just ask the question, what's most pleasing to God? Let's talk about some of these statistics. And I just recently got this from a high-ranking officer in the police department. And he talked about, or he shared with me, this information about the results of beverage alcohol. And just these results ought to tell us a Christian does not want to be involved in this. Every 85 seconds, now that's amazing, every 85 seconds, someone in the United States of America is killed or injured in an alcohol-related traffic crash. Here's another one. Approximately 675,000 children of alcoholics suffer severe abuse or neglect annually. How do you think about that?
But there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Children are being harmed. Alcohol misuse caused the United States economy an estimated $249 billion each year, including health care expense, lost productivity, and the criminal costs. Excessive alcohol use remains the leading preventable cause of death in the United States, responsible for over 95,000 deaths annually. Think about the crime. The impaired state. This is not necessarily what we would call fall-down drunkenness, okay? Someone thinks of drunkenness, they think of a person being sloppy drunk. That's not what we're talking about. The impaired state can lead to a wide range of harmful behaviors, including public disturbances, vandalism, physical altercations, sexual assaults, domestic violence. All of these things are just so amazing to think that people say, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And yet individuals are being hurt as a result of this. About 2/3 of alcohol-related deaths were from chronic conditions which develop from drinking alcohol over time. That includes cancer, liver disease, all sorts of things. And so last week we talked about the moderation argument. One of the things that they said was that people say is, well, they couldn't help it. In Bible times, they could not keep grape juice from fermenting. And the fact of the matter is, that's just not true. There have been some great writers who have done work. William Patton did a great book on Bible wines, and he pointed out they were very familiar with how to keep grape juice from fermenting. They could wash the grapes. They could keep it in a dry, dark, cool place, they would boil down the grape juice, and it would become like a syrup, and they would kill whatever was in it, but it also would be very thick like a syrup, and then they would reconstitute it with water, or they could keep it in a cool place. And we talked about this last week. They talked about the fact that, people will say, well, they didn't have refrigeration. Well, they were smart. Just like your great-grandparents had a spring house, they knew how to take advantage of things like that and submerge it in water or things like that. And then we also talked about, Tony, the fact that the word wine in the Bible, sometimes it's intoxicating, sometimes it's not intoxicating, just like we read from Isaiah 65:8, talking about the wine still in the cluster, talking about a cluster of grapes. And so with all that in mind, we recognize the fact that there are distinctions. Now, I'm going to take this call, and then we're going to get into John chapter 2. Arise to Truth, you're on the air.
Yeah, the books or whatever you might have read, is it possibility that those people that you have read may not be telling the truth? Have you ever thought of that? Because they didn't have electricity. If they were over there in the desert in hot weather about all the time, there was no refrigeration.
Yeah,
and if you dig in there a little bit, the way they always made wine was they put it through the press, and so as soon as you put it through the press, through the skins, it automatically will ferment some if it's set.
Well,
and then if they had, go ahead.
Let me ask you this question, sir. I don't know about your great-grandparents or anything like that, but let's just say old-timers that lived in this region, 150 years ago, it was impossible for them to keep milk and butter because we know that it's going to spoil and go rotten, and they had no refrigeration. They didn't have electricity or anything like that, and so that must have been the case. Is that right?
That's my mother grew up in that situation. She's 92 now, and she grew up where the only thing that they had close to coolness was a spring. And it was not cool enough to keep things from spoiling.
Well, I'll tell you
there was one neighbor. Let me finish this, if you would. There was a neighbor out past them that bought an ice box, and they would put their milk and butter and stuff like that in an ice box. That was like, let's see, my mama was born in 34, so it was probably in the 40s when that was going on that she knew about it.
Well, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Did you ever know anybody that had bad water from their well?
Oh, yeah, that goes on all the time.
Well,
they get muddy or go dry.
Well, or maybe have some contamination.
Yeah.
They didn't have the chemicals that we have today, so it'd be impossible for them to make that water right, wouldn't it?
Well, I think it was probably about like what you'd have to do if you was out here and try and survive on your own. You'd have to have fire and hope to boil it, I guess.
Oh, so they purified. I'm being a little bit sarcastic, not hateful.
I know it. I know it.
But so those are our ancestors that lived 100 years ago, 150 years ago. If they had bad water, they knew how to boil it. They did have spring houses. Okay, now we can argue about how cool it could get in there. But here's the reality. They were capable of boiling the grape juice down. And incidentally, I'll get back to your original question about could they be lying. Boiling the grape juice down.
I've never heard of that. Now,
well, I'm sure you haven't, sir, because I hadn't heard about it until I studied on the subject.
That's why I'm saying is them people pulling your leg that reads that because.
Well, let me tell you something. There are numerous sources. Yeah, it's always possible that there's somebody that wrote a book that's lying, okay? But there are numerous sources. As a matter of fact, one of the sources goes all the way back to Aristotle that talks about the fact that there were different. There was a wine that was intoxicating. There was a wine that wasn't intoxicating. He talks about the fact that they would boil it down and reconstitute it with water. So there's numerous sources. Matter of fact, the reason why I cited William Patton is one of the sources that I'm not dreaming this stuff up. I didn't just get this from somebody on the corner. And no, there's numerous documentation, and we know it's true today. If they were out in the desert and they were carrying grape juice with them, they would have prepared it either by boiling it down or heating it or various things. But, no, there were ways that they could do that. And the fact of the matter is, what would happen when it's immediately coming out of the wine press, if there was, things on the outside of the husk of the grape, there would be a process of putrefaction that would begin to happen. But, they could wash the grapes. They could do things to the grapes to limit that. And so, otherwise, when you go...
See, the way I understand it,
okay.
The way I understand it, what happened to the grapes was either it went to wine or it went to vinegar, and vinegar was close for it to being bad. And that's what they offered Christ, on the cross was the vinegar. But I'll get off here in just a second.
With all due respect to you with this, we have to use the information that we've had. And I've heard, and I'm not saying this is what you've heard, I've heard stories from, this person, that person, but when we look at the people that have actually are involved in it or investigate it, they knew how to preserve. And this is a common thing for people to say, they could not keep it from fermenting. Yeah, they could, just like we can today. And so...
I think we just have to go to that one verse. I think I might have said it last time me and you talked about it over there, where it's talking about being a deacon or a preacher, or one says not given to one and one given a little.
And we talked about that.
Cannot be talking about Welch's grape juice, and I'll let it go at that.
Well, I tell you what we will do. We will discuss that some more. Okay, he already hung up. We will discuss that some more. And I don't know whether we'll get to it today, but let me say this. We talked about that not giving too much wine. I think we mentioned this last week, Tony. If we were hiring a teacher here at the school, we might say we've got to have somebody that's sober-minded. We don't want a cocaine addict. Well, he's not a cocaine addict. He just does some recreationally on Friday night and Saturday.
And that's not going to be acceptable.
That's not acceptable. And so he is literally saying, I don't want somebody that's addicted to wine. It doesn't mean now, we'll take somebody that just does a little bit every now and then. And so we have to understand what's under consideration there. And also, in the same context, the deacon is to be sober in every respect. And so, all we have to go on, I'll be honest, I don't have a degree in chemistry, I don't have a degree in winemaking, but we go to those who have documented these things. And I guess I could take any book. I could take a book on making rockets and say, well, he may just be lying to us, and throw it out. The fact of the matter is, over and over again, there's documentation that shows they could keep that grape juice from fermenting. And he's right that it can go hard and become vinegar, but that's not the only thing that it can become.
It's not. And, folks, we put our trust in people every single day. People who have been educated and who have knowledge of these things and other things. If I have a heart condition, I'm going to listen to my heart doctor. He has been trained. If I want to know about alcohol in the Bible, I'm going to go to the sources, the people who know and have knowledge of that. I'm going to put that together with what the Bible tells me about the God I serve. I'm going to come up with the right answer, and I'm not going to pull strings to get to do what I want to do, Bill.
That's the way we've got to do it. And furthermore, Tony, going back to what we talked about at the beginning in Galatians chapter 5, 19 and following, and the like. Look at the results of what happens with beverage alcohol. Now let's go ahead. Did you have
Bill,
a comment?
For just a moment, and listen, if we were to take God completely out of the picture for just a moment, let's take God out of the picture. Here's some statistics I looked up this week. 70% of all murders, 41% of all assaults, 50% of all rapes, 60% of all sex crimes against children, 56% of all fights and assaults in homes, and it goes on and on and on. The percentage here these are ones that have involved alcohol. What kind of person would advocate alcohol when we look at these? And these are true statistics from our law enforcement who keep records.
Well, maybe they're lying, Tony.
Might be.
Maybe they're lying.
they
I
may
don't
have-
know why they'd be lying about it, but we have those statistics. Now let me play the advocate for just a minute. Well, Tony, I'm sure there are a lot of people who drink and they abuse children, but now I can handle alcohol.
Okay, here's how good you handle it. One drink of alcohol in this situation produces about 0.05%, and it shows up in the blood as that. You know how much it takes to kill you? 1%.
1%.
1% alcohol in your body is deadly. It will kill you. Folks, a man of common sense would not advocate for such a thing.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, common sense would say it should be illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially, and people say, well, who's got a right to tell me what I can do? When you look at what it does to other people, innocent people, how horrible it is to think about that. And furthermore, Tony, you're thinking about this thing where somebody says, but I can handle it. You're supporting an industry. I don't believe that's true, but let's just suppose that you can. Okay, somehow, I don't agree with that position. You're supporting an industry that hurts children, hurts women, hurts families, hurts other innocent people. And so I don't see how anybody could want to support an industry like that. Now, one of the big arguments that people use, Tony, is John chapter 2.
John 2, verse 10.
Jesus made wine, and they say, so there, well, we've already made the argument, and we'll back this up a little bit, that you do not define a word in isolation. And everybody knows this. They don't think about it, but they know it's true. Whether you read the newspaper or you listen to a newscast, you have to define a word in context. No, a word means what a word means. You look it up in the dictionary, that's what it means. Well, which definition in the dictionary? There's usually 3, 4, 5, 6 different definitions for a word. Think about the word fast. What does it mean when I say fast? Well, that means move quickly. No, it doesn't. Well, then it means to abstain from food. No, it doesn't. Well, then it means to stand firm. No, it doesn't. Well, then what does it mean? I don't know because I haven't used it in a sentence. If I say, she finished the race first because she ran fast. Now I know what you mean.
Now we're talking about speed.
Yeah. All right. He was very hungry because he was on a fast. Well, now I know he's talking about abstaining from food. The sailor stood fast on the deck of the ship. Well, I know he's talking about standing firm. And so you got to know the way the word is used in a sentence. And incidentally, if we had to have a different word for every different thing, man, just think we wouldn't be able to memorize the vocabulary. It would be so huge. And so, but we're not idiots. We know how to look at the way a word is used. Well, think about the word ecclesia. That's a word religious people throw around. Church. Now, does the church always mean something religious? Well, yeah, I know what church. No. When you go over to Acts chapter 19, sometimes the word church has to do with a lawful assembly that's been called out of one realm into another realm to discuss the affairs of the community, Acts 19:39. But then in verse 32 and verse 41 of Acts 19, the ecclesia is a riotous mob. And in both of those occasions, it's not even having anything to do with religion.
Yeah.
Now, if I say ecclesia has always got to be the church, how am I going to understand Acts 19? If wine is always intoxicating, then I'm going to have a problem with that. And so when we come to John chapter 2, we'll consider that. Let's get this call. Arise of Truth, you're on the air.
I hate to aggravate you, but I got one more question
Well,
about
we
that.
appreciate you calling.
John chapter 2 there, where you was talking about where he turned the water into wine, and it said they were already. So I'm driving, so I don't have my Bible in my hand, so I'm going to ask you to do this for me if you would.
We're going to get to it.
Before it says they was well drank or well drunk.
Uh-huh.
Could you tell me what that particular word right there in the Greek, look, you can pull it up on your little handheld computers. tell me exactly what they say that word right there means, if you'll do that for me.
Absolutely, we will.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you.
I'll tell you right now, but as we get through this text, we'll talk more about it. The Greek word is methuo, and it can mean intoxicating or it can mean satiated, okay? And again, when we look at the context of this whole situation and the greater context of the Scripture, we have to ascertain, okay, is it intoxicated? If it's intoxicated, you got some real problems, especially if you want to say that Jesus made intoxicating beverage, okay? If they're intoxicated, and we'll talk more about this in a second, but if they're insatiated, it's the idea that
they've had all they want.
They've had all they want.
They're filled.
They're filled. All right. I like pizza, but I can eat pizza to the point that, go down to Pizza Inn, and I've had pizza, and then the girl comes by and says, "What's your favorite pizza?" And I say, "I don't want any more." "Well, I'll make your favorite pizza." "I don't want any more. I'm satiated." All right. Now, we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But let's walk down through this text. Again, let me finish what I was saying, though, about this. If it means intoxicated, if they're well drunk, intoxicated, and Jesus makes additional intoxicating beverage, well, this is a drunken party here.
It's a free-for-all, isn't it?
Yeah. And so you got a real problem with it, but we're going to cover these things as we go down through it. So as we go through the text, we see that they don't have sufficient beverage. And again, we've made the argument, wine can be intoxicating and it can be non-intoxicating. I know that we don't think about it that way today, but we need to think about it in the sense that the Bible talks about it, all right? Isaiah 65 and verse 8, the wine that's still in the cluster, the grapes, all right? Now, so Jesus commands them to fill these water pots, and according to this, according to chapter 2, verse number 6, as we look at this, he says, "Now there are 6 water pots of stone according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece." So this beverage that Jesus is going to make, he's going to make between 120 and 180 gallons of beverage. And now keep in mind, these people have already had all they want of whatever they've been drinking. Now, according to modern-day wedding planners, 100 people drinking a glass per hour requires 80 bottles. That comes out to 14.6 gallons. 14.6 gallons. Now, we'll go on the low side and say that Jesus made 120 gallons of this beverage. According to wedding planners, that would serve over 800 people from start to finish. But now keep in mind, Tony, this wedding party had already exhausted the supply that was intended to be sufficient. And if the well drunk means there that they were well intoxicated, and Jesus is making enough intoxicating beverage for 800 people, what in the world is going on in this setting?
I mean, Jesus is committing one of the gravest sins you could imagine. And in this outline that we're kind of following here, beautiful statement concerning Jesus, he would be pushing people over the edge. You imagine this. Here is the Son of God living under the law of Moses, listening. He should be listening to the Old Testament text, but he's ignoring everything. Can I read one of those texts?
Please.
So let's read Habakkuk 2:15. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbor. Well, do we understand what that is? Is that alcohol? Is that what we're talking about? Pressing him to your bottle, even to make him drunk, that you may look on his nakedness. Now, looking on a man's nakedness is a result of being drunken to a state where you no longer care.
Here, buddy, have a beer. Have a beer.
Have another one. Have another one.
Have another one.
And
that's exactly what Jesus would have been doing here, saying, have another one. They've already have had their fill, and if it was intoxicating what they had, and he makes more intoxicating, he's just saying, have another beer.
It's so inconsistent with the nature of God, with the nature of Jesus, to even begin to think or advocate this makes me sick. I'll be honest with you. I deal with people, and I deal with one man in particular, and we have went over this time and time again, and he just can't get it. But I don't see how you can not get it when you look at Habakkuk 2:15. Then we look at Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15. For we do not have an high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, but what? Yet without sin. So if Jesus is producing this alcohol, that's sin. That is sin. According to Habakkuk, that is sin, Habakkuk 2:15. But then the Hebrew writer, an inspired writer, tells us that Jesus lived without sin, Bill. So which is it? Is Jesus a sinner? Did he produce this alcohol, or is he not? You can't have it both ways.
You know, I just looked this up, Tony, because I was curious about this. And let me just say this. If the people were intoxicated, as some say, and Jesus made an additional intoxicating beverage, the laws of Tennessee would be more righteous than Jesus Christ. Here's what this says. I checked this out. Bartenders in Tennessee have a legal responsibility to cut off visibly intoxicated patrons. Serving a visibly intoxicated person is against the law and can lead to fine, suspension of the liquor license, or even criminal charges for both the server and the establishment. And say, well, maybe these people didn't show signs. Jesus would know who was intoxicated. It says well drunk. Now, if it means satiated, it makes sense. If it means, as some people want it to say, means intoxicated, Jesus would not be as righteous as the laws of the state of Tennessee. Now, just think about how bizarre that is.
And listen, the plea is this, that you put on your thinking cap and put on some reasoning here. Not because Bill Haywood says it, not because I or anyone else says it, not because it's the Church of Christ. Common sense. When you're applying Scripture and you're applying it in a common sense way, you can't come to any other conclusion but that this is wrong.
That's right.
It cannot be. It just simply cannot be. Wine is a malker. Strong drink is a brawler. And whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Well, what about the man who's making it so they can be led astray? He's no better. Matter of fact, he would be worse. If Jesus makes these intoxicating beverages, he's violating the very principles of his Father. Billy, this can't happen.
Well, think about the thin arguments that people have. Well, deacon can have a little bit. No, the argument is don't be addicted, and I've made the point already, say, well, I'm not going to hire somebody addicted to cocaine. Oh, he's not addicted. He just does it on Saturdays and Sundays. No, that's not going to be acceptable either. And as you talked about from various passages, looking at what the wise man had to say, you never find a place where intoxication on any level is sanctioned. It doesn't happen. Now, for medicinal purpose, medical purposes, yes, to sedate a person for various reasons is one thing. But for recreational, social, personal pleasure, we don't find that. It's just not in the Scripture.
No, we don't. Let me read from Proverbs again, Bill. Proverbs 23, beginning at verse 29. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. We're talking about an intoxicating drink. He goes on, verse 32. At the last it bites like a serpent, it stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, they have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake that I may see another drink? Bill, I've never been a drinker of alcohol. I have been administered drugs before. Morphine once, when I mashed this finger completely off. Mashed it off, and so they're administering morphine, and when they did that, Bill, you could have cut my hand, arm, and legs off, and I wouldn't have cared because of the intoxicating effect of that drug. Well, maybe not as strong as morphine, but alcohol has the same effect. It deadens nerves or brain cells. And here's something, folks. Do you realize that the brain cells that are deadened by alcohol, they don't ever regenerate? They never grow back. What damage it does is done for life. It's done for life.
That's exactly right. So when we think about now, the wise man condemns this intoxicating beverage. We realize the damage it does to families, the damage it does to children. We realize what the wise man has to say. And then to come to John chapter 2 and says, oh, Jesus made intoxicating beverage. It is an indictment against God himself. James chapter 1, verse number 13 says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone.
What does this say about religious?
Oh, we got another call.
Another call.
All right. Arise to Truth, you're on the air.
Yes, they talk about the wine where Jesus and we turned the water to wine. He wouldn't been strong wine because he said back in Proverbs 20, verse 1 said, wine is a smoker and a strong drink, raging, and whosoever is deceived thereof is not wise.
Absolutely.
They had trouble with back then, but it was not one time to use wine is for those who are sick or I know the Jesus never told about the Samaritan where the guy was beaten and laid in the ditch, and the Pharisees just turned their head, but he bound him with wine on his wounds. That's the only thing they had to use back then. But never used it to the wrong purpose, like over in Esther, Ahaz, all them was drinking, brings his queen out there, show herself her beauty, which that was not supposed to be done.
Right.
But I'll get back off here, and I thank you for
great
all
points.
you do.
All right, thank you, sir. William made some great points there. You think about Ahasuerus wanting Vashti to come out, and she wouldn't do it.
But that was a drunken party is what was going on.
Think about Herod in Mark chapter 6. Herodias comes out, and I get the impression that there was probably alcohol there, but he became intoxicated apparently by this young woman's behavior and apparently by her looks. He's out of his mind. He says, I'll give you half of the kingdom. You just tell me what you want. And, you know, when we see that sort of thing, people end up doing things that we would think they would never do that. Well, matter of fact, if we have time today, we'll get over to Leviticus 10, and we'll see the fact that a priest and every child of God, according to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 and verse 10, or verse 9, excuse me, every child of God is a priest, and priests are not supposed to partake of beverage alcohol when they're serving before God. Now, when do we serve before God?
Every day.
Yeah, somebody said, well, Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. No.
All day.
Every day, 24/7. And we're not to partake of beverage alcohol because we've got to be, now this is really interesting, we've got to be able to make a distinction between the common and the uncommon, between the sacred and that which is common. And so, you know, the unity of a husband and wife, that's a sacred thing. But you get enough beverage alcohol in a person, they can get to the point they can't make that distinction anymore. And some guy ends up fornicating with his neighbor's wife.
Yeah. I wonder what we have so many people that we have talked to, I have talked to, we've had people call in since we've been discussing this who are trying to justify it. And I wonder, how do people get to the point where they want to justify something that's so easily and clearly seen? And I think one of the problems is we have religious leaders who say that alcohol is fine to a certain degree. So social drinking is fine. And I don't know whether I should mention, I won't mention the name, but it's there. There are even some religions that will use alcohol in their worship services. Military chaplains use it in their worships. You know, alcohol, when you have people who should be on the side of God, that they're on the side of unrighteousness and ungodliness, it's no wonder people are confused and mixed up.
Well, you know, Tony, I think what it comes down to is people have the attitude, I can handle it. Now, I'm sorry if you can't handle it, but I can handle it. Well, there's a couple of things about it. Number one, I don't agree that you can handle it. It's going to soften you. I'm not saying that you're going to
Bill, I can handle adultery. I'm just going to do it one time. I can handle it.
That's the deal. Is
did that make it right?
That doesn't make it right. It's going to soften you, and you're not going to be thinking clearly, and you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to serve as you should. Now, you might think, my private sin doesn't bother anybody. Well, over in Joshua chapter 6, 7, we find out in chapter 6 and chapter 7, there was a man that apparently felt that way. My sin is my business. But it actually cost the lives of 37 men when they went to take Ai, and Joshua was down on his face saying, God, why'd you let this happen? And God says, get up. You got sin in the camp. One man. I don't know, there's 2-3 million Hebrews. 37 men died. They were sent running in retreat because one man sinned, and he took that which was contraband and hid it in his tent. My sin can hurt people that don't even know about my sin, and I think, oh, it's just me. But keep this in mind, Tony, over in Matthew chapter 18, 6 and 7, if Jesus made intoxicating beverage, he would have violated his own teaching.
Absolutely.
Jesus says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, but for offenses must come. But woe to that man by whom the offense comes. And someone says, well, Jesus wouldn't necessarily made somebody sin. Jesus would have been endorsing beverage alcohol. And someone there at that wedding feast would have been in a situation to say, well, apparently it's all right to drink beverage alcohol, and I think I'll just start drinking beverage alcohol. Say, well, you don't know that. It's beyond reasonable to think that somehow this message would not have spread. As a matter of fact, people try to use it today to say, oh, Jesus is good with me drinking beverage alcohol. Just don't get sloppy drunk. You can just get drunk enough that you make bad decisions. That doesn't make any sense. Jesus would have been causing people to sin. And we need to be doing just the opposite, Tony. We need to be encouraging people, no, you be sober-minded. You be in such a state that you're not going to engage in some of these things that are so harmful to individuals, and don't support an industry that's so harmful to individuals. As we look at all this, what happens to that argument that says, well, I can handle it? Well, first of all, I don't believe that that's legitimate. But if it is, who gave you a right to hurt other people?
Yeah, where do you get that right? Here's the question that I want answered, and this comes to our next verse. Who are we living for? Just who do we think we're living for if we're advocating strong drink? Listen to 1 Peter 4, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when he walked in, listen to these things, lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. The man that desires to serve God is not going to be involved in these things. He's just not going to do it. And to come up with some harebrained excuse saying that Jesus made alcoholic beverage, taking it out of context, that's not going to fly. And, you can convince yourself, but the Bible warns us not to deceive your own self. Mm-hmm. And Bill, with all love, people who are doing these things or saying these things, they're deceiving themselves.
Isn't it interesting in that passage right there, Tony, that he mentions drinking parties? He mentions drunkenness, but he mentions drinking parties. This is just where the whole aim is just to get together and drink. You've got enough Jesus, after everyone has well drunk, become satiated with what they're drinking. If it was an intoxicating beverage and they are well intoxicated, and Jesus makes enough for 800 people from start to finish, sounds like a drinking party.
Yeah, and what's going on while all that's happening? What would you say is going on? A lot of riotous living.
Oh, yeah.
That's ungodly. riotous living, and God just wouldn't condone such a thing. He
And
just
if you
wouldn't do
think
it.
you won't drop your inhibitions, you need to think again. And it's the nature of the stuff. And so we need to be ever so careful.
It's an addictive drug as well. Yes, the drug itself is addictive, but it's not just the drug that's addictive, it is the action that becomes addictive. I had a very good friend of mine, and he's in the nursing home now, and a member of the Lord's church, thankfully, for the last 15, 20 years. But he used to be the man that liked the reveling, who liked the drinking, who liked being drunk. He enjoyed it. Why did he enjoy it? And he'll flat out tell you, because it lowered my inhibitions and allowed me to do what I wanted to do sexually. Now, he was violating God, violating his wife, violating the woman he was with, and himself, or the women he was with. But I thank God that he came to a better understanding of the Scriptures. He's repented of those things. But that's why he wanted to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it gives us some sense of maybe comfort that we can do that, but it doesn't make it right in the eyes of God. Let's talk a little bit about the start of drunkenness. There's a sense when we look at Ephesians 5:18 that this is the end of the whole argument. Someone who wants to make the argument, well, you can't find a verse that condemns drinking in moderation. All of the verses addresses only the subject of drunkenness. Well, that's not true. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, there's a contrast between pagan worship and Christian worship. And in pagan worship, drunkenness was very much a part of it, all types of ungodliness involved in pagan worship. But in Christian worship, there is a great distinction there. And Ephesians chapter 5 and verse number 18, and do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. Now, that phrase, and do not be drunk, it is an inceptive verb, present inceptive verb with imperative force. It has the idea, stop doing what gets you drunk. Well, what gets you drunk? The very first drink. It expresses the beginning of an action. The New English translates it, do not give way to drunkenness. Well, how do you give way to drunkenness? It's that first drink. Vine translates it this way, marking the process of the state expressed. Well, what's the beginning of that process when you take that first drink? Young and Haynes says to begin to be softened. Well, Tony, when do you begin to be softened?
First drink.
First drink. Bullinger, to grow drunk. Thayer, to get drunk, to become intoxicated. Be not drunk is translated from the Greek word methusko. It's an inceptive verb, to begin the process of becoming drunk. And so really that verse, especially when you look at the idea, you're contrasting what they did in pagan worship with what they do in Christian worship. And in Christian worship, it is a completely different thing. We're filled with the Spirit. We speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in our heart. In contradistinction, think about the way we live our lives. What's the rest of the world doing? Well, you read that just a moment ago from 1 Peter. Think about what we do in our lives. We want to bring glory to God. We want to be filled with the Spirit. We want to bring glory to God. None of those things happen regarding the idea of beverage alcohol.
Why not just go on the side of safety and leave it alone?
Well, that's
Why not
exactly
just
right.
do that?
Well, go back to the question, what's most pleasing to God? And I think I used this illustration last week. Think about the guy that asked his buddy, tell me this, man. Do you think my wife will divorce me if I take the secretary to lunch and I just sit close to her and I put my arm around her and squeeze her up close to me and just give her a little smooch on the lip and I'll whisper sweet nothings in my ear? Do you think my wife will divorce me? That has got to be about the most foolish, idiotic idea that I've ever heard in my life. If a guy loves his wife, he doesn't even want to get close to anything like that.
So why would he even begin the process of saying, let's go eat?
Yeah.
That's the beginning.
Oh, exactly right. You're exactly right, Tony. Matter of fact, here at the School of Preaching, we have a policy for all of our staff, all our male staff, or for that matter, female staff, you're not alone with the opposite sex unless it's your wife, your mother, your daughter, or granddaughter, something like that. You're not alone with them.
Take away the temptation, right?
Yeah, and we do it not only for the temptation but for the appearance. You just don't do it. And so with that in mind, why would you even think about that first drink? And that's a great point. Why even think about going to lunch alone with a woman that's not your wife?
Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Why start that process? Now, we got a little bit of time left. Let's deal with elders and deacons. 1 Timothy 3:3, elders are required not given to wine, whereas in verse 8, deacons are not to be given to much wine. Not given to much wine. The word much is in contrast with little, is not in contrast, the word much is not in contrast with little, rather is used as a superlative. For instance, think about Ecclesiastes 7:17. Be not overly wicked.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I can be a little wicked.
You can be a little wicked.
Now,
obviously, all our listeners realize we're being silly right now.
being facetious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and facetious.
Yeah.
Well, think about this one, James 1:21, putting off all overflow of wickedness. Now, as long as your wickedness doesn't overflow, it's okay.
So I can do that. That remains within a certain limit.
And everybody would recognize that's foolishness.
Yeah, that's foolishness.
It's a superlative. I mentioned this earlier today, and I think I mentioned it last week. When we look for teachers, we'll not accept a man who's a cocaine addict. Again, somebody said, "Well, he's not an addict. He just does it recreationally on Saturday and Sunday." Well, that's ridiculous. Okay, so again, going back to Galatians chapter 5, verse 19, which one of the deeds of the flesh can we do in moderation, or we can just do a little adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness? Can we just be moderately lewd? Or idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries. Now, I get it that we've got in our mind that drunkenness, and I'm not sure what some people think of drunkenness. Some people probably think about the guy that's laying face down in the gutter, doesn't even know where he is. But the idea of this having an altered state. Now, the fact of the matter is, and we've mentioned this already, that for medicinal use, for medical purposes, we recognize it's legitimate. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 23, there Paul would say to Timothy, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and for your frequent infirmities. I tend to think that this is a fermented grape juice here, wine in the sense of fermented. And the reason why I say that is if it's just grape juice, Paul wouldn't have had to give him that instruction. But apparently Timothy's got some scruples about him and says, I know it's just medicine, but I can't bring myself to do it. And Paul's saying, Timothy, it's medicine. Take your medicine. I've mentioned the fact my mother, matter of fact, Mike Blevins mentioned to me recently, his mother, I think she was in her 90s. I don't remember exactly how old she was. I want to say maybe 93. She was there, and she is near the end of her life, and they want to give her some pain reliever. No, I don't want to get hooked on that stuff. And he's thinking, Mom, come on. You're at the end of life. You're in your 90s. Don't worry about getting hooked on this stuff. But people have scruples. They love God. They have scruples. No, I don't want to do this. I think this is where Timothy is.
That reminds me so much of when my mother was dying with cancer, and she's at the house, and she's only got days left. I mean, very few days, and the cancer is very painful, what she has. It's ovarian cancer, and it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of the family, concerning the drugs she's using, do you think that's a problem with God? How ridiculous.
Yeah.
When she is being given medication in a limited amount to handle the pain. We understand that that's acceptable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But apparently, in the case of Timothy,
it worried him.
It worried him. And I thank God for people who feel that way. And they say, I don't want to step across the line. And so, when you look at in Proverbs 31, and you think about intoxicating beverage, he says, it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, or for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all that are afflicted. So royalty, and incidentally, if you're a Christian, you're royal priesthood. We're not to be drinking. We've got to be able to make good decisions. But now notice who you do give strong drink to. Verse number 6, give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter heart. So there is a time for medical purposes. Somebody's dying, give them something to ease the pain. You have someone in profound depression, and I've known people that I've recommended you need to go see a doctor and see if he can help you with something, because they were at a point in their life where they could not deal with their problems, and I'm talking about profound tragedies in their life, and then they got some help and they were able to overcome it. There is a time and a place for medication. The problem is many people want to self-medicate, and they decide that they can do this on their own. And so when we look at the deeds of the flesh, none of these can be done in moderation, and that's a silly game to try to do something like that. Now here's one. We've only got about a minute left, but you know they accused Jesus of being a drunkard.
They did.
So he must have been a drunkard.
Well, they said it. I read it.
Yeah, I read it. Well, you know, I've got a friend that had a used car lot, and there were people in town that accused him of all sorts of things. I know of one particular case where somebody, he financed cars, and someone would not pay their bill, and he was forced to refinance the car. And they went around town saying, well, now this guy's a thief. If you've got a car and he decides he wants it back, he'll go and get it back. Well, is he guilty just because they say it?
No.
No. You know, and so this idea, they say, well, you know, the people said he was a wine bibber. That does not necessarily make him a wine bibber. Did Jesus have a demon? They accused Jesus of having a demon, but that didn't, just because an accusation is made does not make it, the case. We got about a minute. Tony, if you want to make any closing thoughts here.
Oh, I just want to encourage, especially members of the church, don't get caught up in the nonsense. Use a common sense approach to this. Look at the Bible. Use context to determine what a word means. Don't get in trouble. You know, that's one of the things we do here at the School of Preaching. We teach these students context, context, context. You remember Wesley used to pound that in my head. For 3 years, that's all I heard was context. Mm-hmm. And it's wise. And it's how we learn to understand the Scriptures. It's how we keep from making fools of ourselves. It's what's going to be able to help us stand before God on the day of judgment, having done the right things.
The first 3 rules of Bible interpretation: context, context, context. You've got to look at how it's being used in its immediate context, the greater context of the book that it's written in, and the greater context of Scripture. Paul would say in Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Now think about that for a minute. Holy, acceptable to God. When the Old Testament times, when they offered a lamb, what condition did that lamb need to be in? Perfect, no blemish. I need to strive to offer myself to God that way. I need to do that by being a student of His Word, being submissive to His plan of salvation through faith, repentance, confession, and baptism, and then living a faithful, pure, sober life, sober in every respect. Well, folks, thank you for being with us today, and join us again this Thursday for the Arise to Truth radio program. Folks, thank you so much. If you're still with us on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, or Truth FM, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate very much you making the decision to participate with us in the study of the greatest of all books, the inspired, inerrant, perfect will of God. If you have questions or comments, we look forward to hearing from you. If we can help you in any way, we want to help study with you. And if you disagree with us, we're happy to hear from you. That is not a problem at all. We want to make sure that we glorify Christ in all that we do. If we can help you in any way, please reach out to us. Until next time, we pray that God will bid you a good day.